Floyd Shivambu breaks up the bromance, walks away from the EFF, and divorces Julius Malema. A South African legend passes away, and there is a real mess with Stats SA. I know, so sexy. Statistics, but in this case we really need to talk about it, even though stats is often boring and to be avoided. That's on our show today, and welcome, because you may have noticed some things have changed. We have a poster now and a desk, because this is a brand new show called Weekend Special with Dan Corder. Once a week we bring you the biggest news worth knowing from the week in the messy maelstrom madness that is the movie that is South Africa. So welcome to the first ever episode of Weekend Special with Dan Corder. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Let's kick off with a little bit of big news for us, because amazingly, the TV show on ENCA, the Dan Corder show, that we have, that exists because of this YouTube channel and all of the wonderful support, kindness, feedback, and generosity that you've given us over the last pretty much a year now. And the amazing news is that after 4 months of doing half-hour shows of the Dan Corder show on ENCA, we are finally starting our first ever 1 hour The Dan Corder Show. Monday nights, 1 hour, 9 to 10 p.m. on ENCA. Thank you so much for all that you have done to get us to this point. Right, let's get a quick news story from a sponsor, because yes, we have sponsors now sometimes. How do you think we got this desk? But this is genuinely an amazing story from Showmax. I don't know if you saw the outrageous stunt that Showmax pulled on the Friday before the start of the Premier League. I was stunned as a football fan, along with hundreds of millions of football fans, soccer fans around the world. Julia Stewart, our wonderful South African broadcaster, was hosting a preview show with former England midfielder Owen Hargreaves and Manchester United legend Eric Cantona. When Cantona started behaving really badly, he wasn't answering Julia's questions, he was ignoring Owen, he was sighing, he was huffing, he was rolling his eyes, and then eventually he got up, stormed off set, ripping off his microphone, and the whole world freaked out. And it turns out it was all a stunt from Showmax that went platinum viral around the world. The whole stunt was essentially saying that you don't need a television now. The Premier League is for everyone, everywhere, all the time in your pocket. And if you get that Showmax subscription, you can get all Premier League all the time, wherever you are, on any device that can log on to a Showmax subscription. So many people were duped by this stunt. Incredible. Right, let's talk about the biggest news story of the week, and it still is Floyd Shivambu leaving the EFF for the MK party. It started 9 days ago now, last Thursday, when the EFF called a press conference and leaks to the media announced that Floyd Shivambu would be leaving, and we were all freaking out. We were like, Floyd is leaving. Why is he leaving? Has he been pushed out? Is it because of the VBS scandal and the 16 million rand bribery allegations against him and Malema? And then in the press conference, absolute bombshell announcement, Floyd said, no guys, I'm going to the MK party. And it was wild. It was like you're at the breakup and then you say who you're now hooking up with in front of the EFF branding and regalia and like the very miserable looking face of Julius Malema. It's literally like you're breaking up with someone, you say it's not you, it's me, and also I'm going to Sarah's house right now, Michelle. Why did you do that, Floyd? But he did it, and Julius Malema handled it very well at the time. And then we cut to Monday, where, because we knew what would happen after that was Julius Malema would try to reassert control over the narrative around the economic freedom fighters. Because Floyd leaving, and then rumors of other people leaving with him, allies of him maybe jumping ship to MK, immediately made it look like the EFF was a sinking ship and that the bigwigs were running and trying to go to greener pastures. And Julius Malema was suddenly looking very vulnerable. Like, what was the future of this movement if many of the biggest names in the movement were saying, actually, it's not going well, there's a greener pasture, we're going to go to MK. And so Julius Malema did what he does best. He regained control of the narrative in an extraordinarily powerful 2-hour monologue where he railed against those trying to undercut the revolution. He had no more kind of warmness towards Floyd, basically saying, how could you do this to me? Acting like a jilted, spited lover, or like rejected lover, I have to say, and wrestling back the narrative and saying, no one will stop our revolution, no amount of leaving will stop our revolution, and anybody who wants to leave must leave now. now so we know who are the warriors we can really rely on. Really stirring, mustering, powerful words from just maybe the most talented political speaker in South Africa. He also threw serious shade at Mbuyiseni Ndlozi and Mbuyiseni Ndlozi's wife. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, who is such a chatty, high-profile person, constantly in the media, constantly tweeting, constantly doing interviews. He hadn't said or done or tweeted anything about Floyd Shivambu leaving by Monday night, and it'd been like a full 4 days. And what also happened was his wife had liked a social media post by Floyd Shivambu saying that moving to the MK party was the best thing he'd ever done. So Julius Malema stood up, and I actually want to read you the quotes exactly. Why are those that are known to be the most vocal on social media suddenly silent? Where are their voices when our movement is under attack? Now, I wonder who that could be about. And then he went on to say, a leader of the EFF who is well known, very popular on social media, television, radio, everywhere else. The EFF gets under attack and these leaders do not say anything, but there's a practical way to find out where they stand. Just go look at where their parents stand, look at where their relatives and spouses stand, and you will know that those closest to them are speaking on their behalf because they whispered into their ears. How can someone say the decision to join Umkhonto we Sizwe is the best decision ever taken, and my wife is the first one to like such a thing, and you say Julius Malema is with us? He's just shading and dragging and calling out Mbuyiseni Ndlozi and Mbuyiseni Ndlozi's wife. And I must say, Ndlozi, after Malema and then Shivambu, was the third biggest face in the EFF. Now Shivambu's left, and Ndlozi seems like he's in serious trouble, and there's beef and breakdown between the two of them. The EFF looks really shaky right now. And I know since then Marshall Dlamini has been elevated to the leader of the EFF in Parliament, and the odds are that Marshall Dlamini will become the new deputy leader now that Floyd Shivambu is left. But it's looking like really shaky ground for the fighters, and it's hard to tell what is going to happen next. And this is a crucial moment for the EFF because, as I said, politics is all about momentum. You need to make it look like you are winning so that people believe that you are a winning ticket, so that they vote for you, join your party, invest in you. And right now, the EFF is looking like a crumbling ticket. For the first time in the elections, they shrank and went backwards, and now someone as significant as Floyd has gone to the party that ate up their votes and vastly, easily surpassed them. MK got way more votes than the EFF. It was around 14.5% to about 9.5% in the end. And so the EFF is losing control, that they are the place of the narrative, and it no longer looks like they are the place to be. And that is why this is looking like such a pivotally crazy moment. And this is also a really big moment for the MK party, because Floyd Shivambu is credited with building the infrastructure of the economic freedom fighters, putting together their ideology, picking their color, developing their infrastructure, their organization, while Malema was doing the big charm, riz, charisma offensive, right? And what MK has right now is the big charm, riz, charisma, big face, Jacob Zuma, but they don't have organization, they don't have party structure, and they're constantly in a revolving door mess. And so to bring in Floyd Shivambu, who's got the exact skills to sort that out and build a party and make it solid, looks like a really, really big win for the MK party. That's why Floyd has been made national organizer and will probably get an even bigger role when those roles are defined in the coming months. He got Jacob Zuma's blessing, which is crazy when you think about it, because Jacob Zuma pushed Shivambu and Malema out of the ANC and the ANC Youth League when he was president of the ANC, after Malema and Shivambu turned on him and just rinsed him and tried to undercut him and called out his leadership. There was one crazy story in 2011 where Zuma was addressing the ANC Youth League about South Africa's government's role or part in the toppling of the Libyan government. And according to all reports, at this speech in front of the ANC Youth League, while Zuma was speaking, Floyd Shivambu shouted out, "Unamanga," which means you are lying. And Zuma was furious and essentially turned to him and Isizulu said, "Who's saying that? Are you talking to me? Like, are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?" And now Shivambu has been headhunted and has become the next biggest name in Jacob Zuma's MK party. Politics is crazy. Friends close, enemies closer, or just more likely, if you've got a common goal, then you're friends, and if you don't, then you're enemies. So it's all a really, really wild time, and MK really, really needs Floyd Shivambu's clarity and his organization to calm down the mess that MK has been in since the election. They've been doing poorly in by-elections. Their own members are taking them to court. This is crazy. They keep changing their MP lists and seemingly giving jobs to friends and family relations of the Zumas. They are not winning court cases against the IEC or the SABC. It's a real meltdown at the moment, and they need to actually solidify into a real political party. And maybe Floyd will be their answer for that. Right, I want to talk about a South African legend, an icon who did so much for so many people, who you may not know at all if you're young, or you may remember as that kind of sweet old white dude on SABC2 in the 90s and the 2000s doing something called the Learning Channel with his whiteboard teaching you like physics, chemistry, trigonometry, algebra. His name was William Smith, and he died earlier this week at the grand old age of, I think, 84, 85. And for so many South Africans, he was like home on the television in the 90s and the 2000s. He was the guy who was teaching and ended up teaching so many millions of people the skills, the academic skills in maths and science that they needed to get decent matrics and then to get the whole lives that they wanted and built for themselves off of those matrics. So William Smith was born in then Grahamstown, now called Makanda. He often talks about the fact that he was not good at maths in high school, and if he then had to write matric maths now, he'd probably fail. Ended up getting good at maths in university at Rhodes, and then decided that he wanted to be a teacher. And then in the 1970s, with political unrest and the apartheid government denying good education or even just education at all to black students, William Smith went around setting up multiracial schools that would teach kids what they needed to learn irrespective of race in defiance of the apartheid government, which is great. Then cut to the 90s, and William Smith gets an opportunity to teach maths and science, free access on SABC2 for any South African with a television. And he does an incredible job. Like, he was using teaching methods that were not yet implemented or commonly used in South African schools, explaining new ways of engaging with concepts so that people who were watching could really have a good chance of learning the concepts well. And he was doing that at a time where many South Africans didn't have access to schools. Many South Africans didn't have access, young South Africans, high school South Africans didn't have access to enough teachers. They were in huge classrooms that were under-resourced. And so William Smith was for so many, even teachers who needed to teach those subjects, but mainly students, the way that people learned these vital subjects. And so many millions of people watched it. In fact, in the late 90s, William Smith's program was broadcast through SABC across Africa. And it's estimated that on some days in his career, more than 100 million viewers saw his work and learned something about science and maths from William Smith across Africa. So a bona fide icon in any context, and in this case he just happens to be a South African icon. It is so beautiful, the contribution that he has made, and for all of these phenomenal contributions he was awarded the Order of the Baobab in I think 2019 or 2020, which is one of the highest orders, like awards and congratulations and thank yous that the South African state can give to South African citizens, everyday civilians, for completely phenomenal work. So absolutely iconic William Smith. I hope through my little fanboy fun fact rundown and tribute, you've come to understand his impact and the kind of scale of the gift that he gave to so many people. All right, final story. It's about Stats. I know your heart is racing, but this is really important for you to understand. Stats SA is the company with an incredibly important job. Stats SA's job is to find out what is going on in South Africa, to find out how many people there are here, what race, gender, age they are, how many people are working, what money they're making, what are labor conditions like, how many people are giving birth, how many people are trying to give birth, how many people are dying, how many people are getting educated, how well are they getting educated, the fundamental data and facts of South Africa, what the country is, come from Stats SA. They have an incredibly important job. They do lots of surveys all the time. They also do a census once every 5 to 10 years. They've got to be really good all the time, and they've got to get it right over and over so that we have good information about how South Africa is, what South Africa is right now, and what life is like for those living in it. And Stats SA's data is then taken by government to draw up and assign budgets and to inform policies. And unfortunately, a few years ago, Stats SA did the census and it went really badly. Like, they blamed it, maybe it was because of COVID or because people were scared of coming outside and answering surveys because of security concerns. It doesn't matter the reason. Stats SA had a really bad time. And when that census came out, alarm bells started firing. So quick explainer about stats. When you do a survey of an enormous group of people, it's literally impossible anywhere in the world to interview everybody. So statisticians try to figure out how many people they need to talk to. They talk to that many people, and then they can extrapolate to say, in this case, the whole country is probably like this. This is a decently accurate representation of the larger group of people. And Stats SA's 2022 census had a 30% undercount, which means that they spoke to way too few people, which meant that the margin of error, i.e., like how possible it is that that group of people was not a good representation of South Africa, was significant. And Stats SA for the last little while has said, no, it's fine, it's good enough, our data is good enough, even as top statisticians and demographers have said 30% undercount is not good enough. Also, there are discrepancies within your data. Like we're not sure that this information is reliable at all. And then earlier this week, Stats SA came out and said, yeah, you were right. Our bad. So they're still saying that overall population-wise, the data that they have is strong enough, maybe, but they also published a list of exclusions. Basically, kinds of data and information that they gathered that they say is not usable because they're not sure. There's no way of knowing whether or not it's accurate enough because they didn't get good enough, reliable enough data. And the exclusions list has got some really big kinds of data. That's really important. So it says the following variables or themes will not be published. The themes include income and earnings. If South Africans are working, how much are they making? Money. Second category, labor and employment. What is it like to work? What jobs are South Africans doing? Who is working? How long are they working? Are they working well? And then the third category or theme in the exclusion is mortality and fertility. Literally, like births and deaths. This is crucial, non-negotiable information that we need to understand and know what South Africa is, what life is like for South Africans, and what is happening inside of our borders. And it is also crucial information for budgeting, for how are we going to apportion our government revenue from tax to different projects and different policies to try to help South Africans. This is the information that we need to make that money well spent and to assign it in the right ways. And so the fact that we don't have any reliable information about that, not even published, is a complete disaster for Stats SA and for the government and therefore for the whole country. And now lots and lots of experts are coming out saying that they just don't believe that the data, even in the other categories, is reliable. There's one demographer called Rob Dorrington who created a technical report that found that Stats SA had overestimated South Africa's population by as much as 1 million people and had overcounted the populations of white people, Indian people, and populations of small towns. And if that's true, then the whole census is contaminated. It's all a mess. And it's unbelievably important that the government finds money or does something. Surely we can't just sit on this data that is wrong and unreliable for the next 10 years until the next census. We can't rely on the old census anymore. And we know that South Africa has fundamentally changed since then in many ways. So stats can be boring. And this story wasn't particularly sexy, but this is really important to know about and talk about as we try to find a resolution for this Stats SA disaster, because it really matters to the whole country. Right, those are the biggest stories, the news worth knowing from the last week on the first ever episode of Weekend Special from myself, Dan Corder. Let me know what you thought about this new format, this new show, about the desk, about the posters, whether or not you even like any of this, and let me know what you thought of the stories. And we'll be back next weekend with the next edition of Weekend Special, all the news worth knowing from the last week in South Africa.